Jay Owens, city engineer, here with Mark Anderson, the MnDOT project manager. And we got some new things that started this past month and some things to go over for schedule moving forward. But I can say one thing that I've been working a lot on is the utilities on 3rd Street, and we have all of the utilities, sewer and water, sanitary sewer and water in, and all of the water mains have passed. So we've hooked people up and got people back on. So that took, there was a lot of work in there. I know there's a little bit of storm sewer left to do, but it feels good to be getting past that underground part and looking to get a road put back in place. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mark because he's got some interesting things on both Pier 1 and Pier 2 that have happened, and other work going on the bridge decking and beams on the Wisconsin side, and culvert work too. So
yep.
Yeah.
So as Jay said, Pier 2 in the river, they finished the 4 drilled shafts. You've probably heard the noise, but they are starting to build their cofferdam over there. It's all that rattling in of the sheet piling. They vibrate the sheets into the ground below water. So they'll get that cofferdam completed, get that pumped out, and do some excavation work in the bottom around the drilled shafts, pour a concrete seal, and start working on the footing and work the pier up and out of the water, hopefully. Contractor is working 6 a.m. to about 8 p.m. over there, so they had talked about working 2 shifts up to about midnight, but they've changed their mind on that, which is good because that cofferdam was getting pretty loud there yesterday when we were standing there. So
loud especially for the people at the campground there and on that side.
And it was just echoing. I don't know if it's echoing under that bridge or what, but
Sure.
It was very loud there.
So that seal that they pour, Mark, that's basically when they pump that out, they're at the bottom of the river.
Yep.
They got the cofferdam up holding the water back, and they're down at the bottom doing some excavation and then pour that seal basically on riverbed.
Right, yep. So that keeps any water from pushing up out of underneath and blowing that seal out or blowing the foundation out.
How thick is that seal? That's
usually they're 10 to 12 feet.
Okay.
Depends on where you are.
And all becomes part of that pier then.
Right.
It stays in place, and they build their footing from there and so forth on top of those drilled shafts.
So then the contractors moved over to Pier 1, and they started drilling the first shaft at Pier 1 yesterday. And they hope to have that done in about a week and a half and have that concrete poured for that drilled shaft, and then they'll start on shaft number two there, and they hope to be out of there roughly in about 3 weeks. So.
And there's 2 shafts to do on the Minnesota Pier 1 side.
Yes.
Okay. How long did you say that?
They were hoping for about 3 weeks to
Okay.
have both shafts drilled and poured.
Okay.
As far as like the north side, they have all their beams set. The deck formwork is in place for piers 3, or from span 3 all the way to the north abutment. They are placing the rebar for that deck, and they hope to have the concrete deck poured probably late this month. That's their goal anyway right now. So it depends on weather, of course, but looking at that deck pour here late this month. Surcharge is sitting there. That's
questions I've had on that. Is that how high the road's going to be? But you could explain.
Yeah. So what there's material underneath that area that's too deep to excavate back out. It's soft material. So we preload it with, I think here it's 12 feet of sand. So that compresses that material that's too soft down below and gets all the settlement out of the future roadbed. So that settlement has to sit for up to a year. We believe it'll be shorter than that, but the contract calls for up to a year for the settlement to come out.
And that's where all those wick drains that were placed are acting to take that water out of that material and get it compressed down and get ourselves a good base to build a road on.
Yep. And the contractor is going to be hopefully placing the box culvert there at the north end of that project. Do they call that Mud Lake? What is it?
Mud Lake, yes.
Okay. Yep, that's Mud Lake back there.
So when is that work going to be?
They're doing excavation work right now. They do have to start building the wire mesh retaining wall that's down there first before they start setting the box culvert pieces. So I would think you'll see box culvert pieces sometime next week.
Okay. I know a few weeks ago we had quite a void develop underneath that maybe you want to talk about what happened there and what repairs, kind of emergency type repairs, and it caused some traffic backups. So
yeah, it sure did with the flagging that they did out there to get traffic through. But yeah, we really appreciate everyone's patience with that.
Yeah.
So what had happened with the way the sheets were driven, there was some areas where with the people driving over it, the material would kind of vibrate and fall out around where the sheeting was around the old box culvert there. So they had to excavate, open that up, and I believe they filled it with concrete the first time, and I think the second time they did put crushed rock in there, and then they paved over the top of it. So
basically a sinkhole developed because material was going out through the sheeting or
Right.
the gaps in the sheeting or something like that.
And then the contractor's done some work to repair those gaps, so that won't happen again, or shouldn't happen again.
Okay, good.
And let's see, on the Minnesota side, the contractor set the beams over Highway 61. They're starting to build the deck forms for that bridge. I would think you'll see some rebar here shortly, and then they'll be pouring that deck here late this month. At least that's what their schedule shows right now.
And you might even, if you've been on 61 there and looked up at the abutments, there's some decorative wings that were cast into the corners of the abutments. You've seen that, Nancy? So I think it turned out really nice. Yeah. Good. I'm glad you think so as well. But yeah, that was kind of neat to see some of our first aesthetic element that we've kind of talked about a lot through our whole project, and we'll have, of course, a lot more of that coming. So.
Right.
What about an update on the bridge over the driveway at the end of Bluff Street there?
Yeah, the contractor's working on the abutments there, so I would hope they'll have that, get that done here shortly.
That's of course, much smaller bridge, so yeah.
Right, yeah, so they're working on the two, there's, I think, 4 abutment pours for that, so I think they're gonna have one here done shortly, so.
Okay. And then there's contractually, there's a point that the parking lot for Red Wing Shoe needs to be back open again, so that's part of that, getting that bridge built, and then also Bluff Street back together, because Bluff Street turns into essentially their new driveway,
Right.
getting back into that parking lot, going underneath that bridge, so, yep.
And then you've seen the contractor working on 3rd Street, and
Yep.
that's ongoing. I believe they have, like Jay said, all the underground is done in that area, so hopefully they'll start doing their subcut and see some progress in there.
Yep, putting road back together and getting that, at least the Potter Street intersection, Potter Street and 3rd, open again to traffic, and then we'll work with the businesses to get the rest of the access put back together here, and exciting to get done with those utilities. That took a little longer than we had hoped along that stretch. The removals started earlier than they got in. We're getting into it, but that's kind of how they staged it with their operations. So we appreciate the patience for those businesses that were impacted throughout the summer on that project. So, yeah. Retaining wall work as well is ongoing, kind of along ADM there, and
then retaining wall 1, kind of off the Bluff Street, and 63 bridge there. So,
can you explain a little bit of what happened with the Barn Bluff itself? Why we had to restrict some laneage down there?
Sure. You probably noticed there's been a pile of limestone has fallen off the bluff.
Nancy's shaking her head. She's noticed it.
It fell, I believe, on a Sunday morning. And it actually took out one of the vibration monitors that was right below there. So I'm not really
probably
sure.
Set off an alarm then on the vibration monitor.
I'm not sure it lasted long enough.
Maybe it just smashed it so quick. Yeah. So
yeah, we put the barrier out on the highway just in case something else was to fall and hit that pile of limestone that's in the ditch right now. Because obviously, comes down, it would hit that pile and roll out on the highway. So we don't want that. Contractor's going to get in there and clean it up, or we're waiting for a recommendation from one of the consultants that's been hired to review Barn Bluff. So see if we have to go over after more of up on the bluff or not. So.
And Nancy, you've lived in that area. This has happened before, and there's been, I know we had to take a rock out that was sitting next a couple years ago, one that had rolled down and it was up against a small tree. And they went up and actually broke it into smaller pieces before it just rolled down. It was a big one. They went up and broke it into pieces to roll it down the hill. So there are times this happens through the course of time here, freeze thaw and things like that. So, but yeah. All right, you got some photos to show us, Mark, or some of the construction this past month?
So the pile of limestone falling wasn't necessarily bridge related, or?
Nothing. It happened on a Sunday, and then nothing that, what I understand, Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but none of the vibration monitors showed any vibrations over the threshold that would be anything bridge related.
No,
We would have
not in
known
that area.
there would have been something that showed up because we were monitoring construction the whole process through there, and it's I think it's just one of those times that something broke loose, and it's happened before, and it'll probably happen again. So. Yeah.
As limestone ages, you get cracks in it. You tend to get water in there. Freeze thaw tends to make those cracks wider. Just kind of with the nature of limestone, it does degrade and fall.
Sure. Is your consultant looking at other parts of the bluff that could be susceptible to this in the near future again? Is that
Yes.
what you were talking about? Because they did quite a study before the project even started,
Right.
and had identified areas that look like these are weak areas. These are areas that could suffer failure just naturally as well. So, yeah. All right.
So just some pictures out on the project. This is 3rd Street. With the rains we've had here recently, it's been really wet, difficult to work some of that material.
Not open for traffic yet, as you can see.
Not quite ready for it. Let's see, what do we got next? So this was yesterday. They were pouring one of the retaining wall segments on wall 1. And I forget the number of which wall this is here that's coming back off of the bridge over Bluff Street.
Over Bluff Street, okay.
This is one of the abutments for the bridge over Bluff Street. You can see the contractors in there getting ready, getting the rebar all into place. You can see on the back side of that form, as Jay was talking about some of the aesthetic elements, gives the concrete a different look.
That's the texture that'll be imprinted, basically, the squares there that you see in the rectangles.
Oops. I should have turned this one. Sorry.
You can go down to the bottom there. I think you can just flip it right there.
So this is a picture kind of looking between the two abutments for the bridge over Bluff Street. I can see.
So you can see that's a very small, basically a driveway opening underneath there. So you can kind of see the form work, but it's not a real big bridge span because it's just enough to span their driveway.
And this is the sheet piling that the contractor's driving in for the cofferdam at Pier 2. Like I said, as they rattle those, or they vibrate those sheets through the water and into the ground underneath where the pier will be. Quite a noisy operation. You do not want to stand very close to that.
So with that picture, Mark, you can also see across to Pier 1, it looks like the drill rig is set up over there. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. They're, like I said, working on that first shaft of the Pier 1. And this is just a shot looking back to the north at the beams and the forms that are up for the deck pour.
So Mark, looking at that, you can see the piers have their texture to them. When do they get their coloring to get that limestone color as called out in the,
That's typically one of the last things they do.
Okay.
So they don't get, because they have to be cleaned and then they get dirty if you paint them before you have your concrete deck poured in that. So they like to.
So it's like a paint or stain that you're using on this for your
Yes.
special surface.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's the sheeting for the box culvert by Mud Lake. You can see how wet and messy it is. Like I said, the water level is up very high on those sheets, so they're pumping that out and trying to get in there so they can continue working. And that's the auger for the drilled shaft at Pier 1. So they have an exterior casing that's, I believe this is 13 feet wide, that it's 15 feet long, so it's pushed into the ground about 13 there. Then there's an interior casing as well that's, I believe, a 12-footer that's pushed further down from that, and they're starting to auger that into the ground right now.
And that's the 2 12-foot shafts on the Minnesota side.
I believe they're 10 and a half. But
10 and a half,
This
okay.
casing's 12 and a half, then they'll put a smaller casing inside of that as
Okay.
they get down into the rock. And it's just another shot looking at the cofferdam from Pier 1. So you can see down here in the middle of the picture is what they call the ring. That's where the sheets are braced up against, and that supports the sheets so they don't collapse in.
So Mark, what's the contractor's schedule for being able to actually start on the main span, having these piers, Pier 1 and Pier 2, to a point where they can start setting the tubs
Right.
across the river? Is that, I mean, I know it's rough.
Sometime next spring is all. We're not really sure where they're at right now.
So sometime next spring, seeing main span starting is kind of the, okay.
Right. And that's the end of my pictures.
All right.
Any questions?
Any questions Nancy, a question?
Yeah, what's the time guesstimate, because of the weather, I understand, on getting Bluff Street and finished and paved and all of that? I mean, is there
Sure.
a rough guess?
Nancy's asking about Bluff Street, basically road building, getting Bluff Street put back together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure what their schedule is for Bluff Street. Do you remember what they mentioned? I don't.
It was, well, we were kind of talking both about Third and Bluff in that meeting, and I think kind of the idea was that there's still, yesterday when we met, there's still some storm sewer things that need to be done, and they were working on those today. So they should be following up. I mean, we don't have, we're in October right now, so we don't have a lot of time to get roads built before freeze up. So you should be seeing grading work and things happening there within the next few weeks to get ready for getting it put back together. Contractually, you have to have access and parking lot open by November 1st. Is that correct? Or November 16th?
16th, I believe.
To the Red Wing Shoe parking lot, and that's their access. So there you're kind of looking at, we got to get it done right now. Yeah. So. Patty, did you have anything or been hearing anything at all?
No,
Nothing? Okay.
we haven't heard a thing. We just have been keeping up on the progress, and
Okay.
delay notices have been good. When those delays went into effect, we got several thank yous in our office of like, thank you for letting us know about that, because we were wondering what was going on.
Sure.
So,
Yep. Oh, good. Patty's mentioning that they've been keeping up on getting the notices out, and people are thankful to know when delays are coming or flagging operations, or, the one that was the emergency one was that sinkhole, and that's a little bit tougher to be ahead of, but we got out a news release, as soon as we could, and then had to get working on that for safety reasons. But other than that, the nighttime construction that we've had has gone well. I think it was probably nowhere near the same sound as we talked about as when you're doing demo work, right? Yeah. Yeah, Nancy didn't hear them out there. They moved forms over the evening. I think that's coming up again, isn't it?
Right. There'll be some flagging tonight again between midnight and 4 a.m., I believe, to move some forms.
To move some form work around. So try to keep the notices going out and let people know what's going on. And again, calls can go directly to Mark and myself, and we work together to get them answered. And we do appreciate the patience, like down there by Knutson's and having Potter Street closed, not getting across there near Anides, and the Marie's restaurant in the parking lot. We've done some things to open up their left turn that off of Plum Street to make sure people can get in and out there easily to their parking lot. But it's been under construction, that's for sure.
is that all kind of related to that November date, or not necessarily?
Contractually, that street is not on the November 16th date. However, we're talking with MnDOT about from our standpoint, it would be nice to get that all put back together because that's the way the project was kind of laid out, staging-wise, was that this year, Third Street would be back open again, and we're doing what we can. We have to get Bluff Street, and we're pushing to get Third Street. We're looking for some ways to work with the contractor to make that happen. So I know Mark and I was discussed a little bit yesterday, and we're going to talk a little bit more today on that to see where we're at with getting that put back together. At a minimum, getting Potter and Third open, the crossing, and maybe get the radiuses in, and also get some work done up at the intersection of Plum and Third there, where, right now the barriers are out into the road, and we've got some parking restricted in front of the Redmond Club. We want that all pulled back and get at least part of that built and put back in place. So we'll keep you posted on that as we learn more. So for sure. You got anything else to add, Mark? I think
No, I don't think
exciting that Pier 1 is under construction. That's good to see.
Very good.
Yeah, because you can't put your main span across the river with only one of the piers done. So it's good to see that getting started here this week. So, all right. Thank you for coming to the meeting, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.